Okay, everyone, welcome. Today is a Planning and Zoning Commission special meeting. It is Monday, December 9th, 2024 at 7 o'clock, 7:02 p.m. We are in room 206 at the Town Hall. Tonight we have a public hearing and then a general meeting with time permitting. So getting right into the agenda, the first item is the continuation of public hearing regarding the site plan application number 312, special permit application number 340, flood damage prevention application number 448, landfilling and regrading application number 567, PL 24-130, TCNE Metro Development Inc. 11622 Thorndal Circle, and tax lot number 9 as shown on Assessor's map number 39. This is a proposal to raise 5 existing office buildings on the subject property and construct a new residential community consisting of 5 multifamily buildings, garages, amenity areas, driveways, parking, drainage, utilities, landscaping, and to perform related site development activities within a regulated area. A total of 175 apartments are proposed. The 11.004 plus or minus acre subject property is located at the northwestern terminus of Thorndal Circle, approximately 442 feet northwest of its intersection with Boston Post Road, and consists of the following parcels located in the designated office DO, designated office multifamily residential overlay DOMR, and residential R1/3 zones. 1 Thorndal Circle, map 39, lot 18, 1.958 plus or minus acres. 16 Thorndal Circle, map 39, lot 11, 2.363 plus or minus acres. 22 Thorndal Circle, map 39, lot 17B, 4.343 plus or minus acres. And Hecker Ave, map number 39, lot number 9, 2.34 plus or minus acres. The hearing was opened originally on October the 1st, 2024. It has been continued a number of times, and here we are. Guys, what do we got?
Sure, a number of items have come in since the last public hearing. There's been a number of submittals. We wanted to kind of outline them for the commission, explain what's come in, and then the applicant will present. We'll take input from the town's peer review engineer on traffic and parking, Greg Del Rio of Hardesty and Hanover, and we'll also take comments from the general public.
Okay.
So, Fred, setting this up, I'll note that the applicants received a number of approvals through this process. Sewer Commission approval on July 9th, Environmental Protection Commission approval July 10th. There were amendments to the zoning regulations and zoning map approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission on July 30th, which applied the DOMR zone, which you referenced earlier, to the property, and amended section 465 of the regulations to allow the commission to reduce or waive rear yard setbacks and to allow freestanding parking garages to serve multifamily dwellings within the DOMR zone. Most recently, the applicant received a December 5th letter from the Architectural Review Board with a positive report. They'd gone to the ARB in September, October, November, and then received that positive report December 5th. Most recently, there's been referral comments from Greg Del Rio of Hardesty and Hanover. Letters dated September 27th, November 21st, and most recently December 5th. Fire Marshal Bob Bush sent in comments August 26th, September 24th, and December 5th. The LTA, Legal Traffic Authority, which is the Police Commission, met on October 2nd and sent in a letter dated December 5th, which has been uploaded and is part of the file. And Joe Canis from Ty and Bond looked at stormwater drainage, part of the EPC review, and that was done in June, with subsequent letters October 1st and October 22nd. So we have a number of applicant submissions which have come in. October 17th, and October 21st response to Hardesty and Hanover, October 24th response to the LTA Police Commission, a November 6th response to the Fire Marshal, November 13th responses to Hardesty and Hanover, and December 3rd and December 9th responses to Hardesty and Hanover. You may have noticed some items were uploaded by the applicant late today, and we did upload a number of comments from the general public over the past week or two, and I think there were at least 2 or 3 uploaded today, members of the public. So that brings us up to date on where we are from October 1st, and as I mentioned, previous approvals to tonight.
And did you mention the ARB?
Yes.
I saw that we got a approval from the ARB.
Yeah, December 5th, positive report from the ARB. That was basically the 4th time they went to ARB, and a number of changes were made in response to the ARB comments.
And the legal traffic authority signed off on it, as did the fire marshal?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Okay then. Well, I'll allow the applicant to continue to summarize where we left off here. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so
See you.
much, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, belated.
Yep, hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Hope everyone's getting ready for good holidays and New Year's and everything. For the record, my name is Jaclyn. I'm a partner at Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, TCNE Metro Development, Inc. Our entire roster is here to answer any questions that folks have tonight. Representing Trammell Crow, Michael Adamo, Nick DeSatnik, and Aaron Levy are with us, as they have been for almost a year now. Tom Daly, our project engineer, Dave Sullivan, our traffic engineer, and Craig Flaherty of Redness and Mead, all here from our project team, my associate Dan Chappell, and of course Jared Nielsen, the current owner of the property. We're here, I think, as Jeremy and Fred alluded, to continue and in our mind really ready to complete a process, the public hearing concerning the redevelopment of these properties. Jeremy, you mentioned that this public hearing opened on October 1st, a little over 2 months ago. But this is an application, this is a project that really started almost a year ago, back on February 6th, 2024. That was when, if you remember, we were down in room 119 and some of us brought a pre-application to you discussing, hey, we've got what we think is a pretty neat idea about re-envisioning Thorndal Circle, and we'd like to get your temperature on that. Since that initial conversation, this project has not only been reviewed, but again, as staff has mentioned, has been approved by the Environmental Protection Commission, by the Darien Sewer Commission, by the Architectural Review Board, by the Fire Marshal's Office, the local traffic authority, and has also received positive comments from the town's independent engineering and traffic experts, Tighe & Bond and Hardesty and Hanover, respectively. I think it's safe to say that this project, over the several months-long review by half a dozen authorities, has been one of the most thorough and most thoughtful processes that any application has seen in this town. And I think it's that careful and thoughtful review that has started out as a really good project turned it into a great project, and something that we'll all be able to be proud of once it's finally built and up and running. And maybe even an example for other communities to follow. I was going to start by discussing some of the ARB changes that we made. We're having some technical difficulties that we will address, I'm sure. I'd offer to help, but I'll only make things worse. So Dan and Fred, if you guys are taking care of it. But as that's getting squared away, I think it's worth it to spend some time on the review process that the fire marshal and the local traffic authority went through. We met, and I'm looking to Tom and Craig to clarify this. We met with the fire marshal, I think even before we even filed the formal site plan and special permit application. That was to make sure that any comments or concerns that he had at the outset we could take into account with the first application, the first plan that you all saw a couple of months ago. Once our applications were filed, we had 2 or 3 additional sit-down meetings with him, provided responsive comments to everything that he offered us. And just looking at his comments, he concluded that we had addressed all of his concerns at this point in time. I think it's important for folks to understand about the fire marshal review is that they kind of live with this project well past the planning and zoning process is complete. Should the Planning and Zoning Commission approve a project, a property owner has to go and get a building permit to actually build the project. The fire marshal will review all building permit drawings and make sure everything is up to code. Fire marshal will also review all plans that are filed to get a certificate of occupancy. So the fire marshal will continue to review the project well after the public hearing is closed and this application is ultimately approved. Similarly, we had several meetings with the local traffic authority and met with the chief of police, some of his colleagues, before we filed our formal site plan application. Again, to make sure that we were filing something that was in line with their expectations for the neighborhood and traffic safety and things of that nature. The LTA, I think, considered this application at 2 or 3 of its meetings. You received their comments, that positive endorsement of this, and just, I think, one line that I think bears repeating for all of us here tonight, in their letter, the LTA concludes that there appears not to be any significant increase to traffic or change to roadway use that, quote, would have an impact on public safety, which is really the key question when it comes to traffic in a planning and zoning application process. Now that we're ready to go with our visuals, thanks so much, guys, for making that work, walk you through some of the modifications that we made as part of the ARB process. And again, as you mentioned, Jeremy, multiple meetings that led to these modifications. They provided some constructive criticism along the way that we believe ultimately, again, turned a good project into a great project and involved collaboration, not just thoughtful comments from your colleagues on the ARB, but collaboration and cooperation on the part of Trammell Crow. So Dan, why don't we start clicking through some of these slides. You're going to see some before and after images. I thought these were really the best to show you how the process has worked here in this instance. You'll see the before on your left generally and the after on your right. And while we were proud of the initial project, like I said, we wanted to be responsive to comments that we received. So you'll see what started out with flat roofs, kind of gray, darker tones, was transformed over the course of 3 or 4 months into something with a much more softer color palette, more articulated elements in the roof, and really more diversity in terms of the materials that are on the building facade itself. Something that you see on this image, and this is building A, so this is as you're coming into the neighborhood on the Thorndal Circle side, you'll see that there's a stone masonry element on the pedestrian level or the ground floor, something that the ARB was really excited, or encouraged us to adopt, and we were excited to adopt. If you look on the before, again, something that you'll see if you look at all the images throughout the property, we were...
Jay, can I just process check? So the final renderings, when we pull them up on our computer, they're the ones dated 11/25?
Yeah, there are some, yes, 11/25,
Okay,
correct. Yeah. You'll see on the before, we were quite uniform in terms of the window treatment on the buildings. Folks told us we maybe were a little too uniform in terms of the windows, so we, again, lined it up with multiple window types, not just on building A, but throughout the entire property. Why don't we go to the next slide, Dan? This is another image. I think some of you saw this before, the clubhouse before and after, something that the folks on ARB were really excited about and we're looking forward to as well. Why don't we go to the next slide, Dan? You saw this image already, the sort of courtyard that we're proposing right in the middle of building B. Next slide, Dan. This is a nice image that we shared with the ARB. It gives you a pedestrian perspective of the kind of main thoroughfare in front of building B. Not only do you see the different tones and window treatments, but the different, again, the masonry elements and the different facades all help to really enliven the pedestrian experience along the thoroughfare. Let me go to the next slide, Dan. This is another sort of moment that building B, or that the ARB was looking for on the project. The western end cap of building B, something that really has become a point of pride in the project. Next slide, Dan. And we can just run through these. These were, Craig and KTGY worked on these. Give you a look at the parklet through the 4 seasons, and you can just kind of go, this is winter, obviously. And we joked, you can kind of see where the birds are slowly making their way across the plain here. This is winter, spring, summer, fall. Those images show you what the property, when the trees are in full bloom, when there's no leaves on the trees, and it really shows you just what an asset to the project that parklet on the west side of the property is. The next slide, Dan. Why don't we go to the next one? And I think we have another before and after. I think this is a good place to end the conversation on architecture. Just another before and after. Where we started to where we ended up. Really a much more residential, much more architecturally interesting design that some would say, more fitting with the Darien community, and certainly lets folks know that they have arrived at the property. So that's it for the architectural update. I know Dave had some comments that he could share too in terms of site flow and pedestrian access, but if Dave, you want to come up and handle those, or do you want to hear from Greg first, however you all would like to?
Why don't we go through, because it's the next slide.
Okay,
We'll go
perfect.
through that, because we'll spend a lot of time on traffic, not so much on pedestrian.
Yeah, perfect.
Good evening, Dave Sullivan again with SLR. I'm really just going to touch on a couple of things, not necessarily for the comment responses. I'll let Greg handle that. But there were a couple of comments that we heard that we wanted to make sure that we addressed with y'all. The first one is the sidewalk network. We had shown you the larger picture, the connection to the train station downtown, and it was asked, what does the network look like on site? Well, in bright pink is our sidewalk network, and you'll see it's substantial, starting over at Route 1 and going into the side along Thorndale. There's a robust sidewalk network. There's a number of crosswalks, and you've seen some of them in some of the renderings where they're not just plain painted crosswalks, but there's treatments on them. So we have a four-way intersection here for pedestrians with some treatments in the intersection as well as crosswalks. We have around this corner here will be some textured or street printed pavement along this corner, which is pedestrian friendly. An additional crosswalk with curb extensions there. A crosswalk over where Thorndal officially ends. And again, the sidewalk will be rehabilitated and enhanced along Thorndal, getting to Route 1. And in addition, there'll be crosswalks at each of the public intersections with Hecker and as well as with Route 1 there. Other things shown here, and I think this is probably redundant, but there's some gathering spaces and some courtyards that have been added, and of course the paths up in the corner there, and you can see a courtyard there, here, and here as well. The next thing is to identify where some of the on-site uses or facilities would be. So we're showing the EV charging station, the loading zones, as well as the bike parking. The bike parking is in blue at two locations. You can see the bike parking, the loading zones, and again, this just shows where they are. As part of our response to H&H comments, we've given the turning movements, showing how they get accessed by single unit vehicles, and but they're shown at each of the buildings, and there's two larger loading areas shown right along the main spine road, and this will be useful not only for potentially move in, move out, but other quick deliveries that take place with many of the vehicles, and it's fairly centrally located. And then lastly, we've shown the red potential locations for EV spaces. We've identified a number of them here, but there will be a minimum of 3 for each building, with the ability in the underground infrastructure for 10% of the EV. So those are the two things I wanted to be sure to mention. Thank you.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, I mean, that really wraps up, I think, the key items that we wanted to address. We obviously wanted to hear from Greg, hear from the public, and we'll respond to questions that you all have or the public has too, after maybe Greg has a chance to
Sure.
speak. Yeah.
So I think in the end of the last hearing, can you have your traffic guide? We asked you to do a bit more of a study on what the look like on Hecker would be, because in your studies it was a little bit disjointed. Can you just go over that specifically, and then we'll bring Greg up and then see if we've got any
The Hecker Avenue
study.
Just studying the number of trips that would go westward on Hecker Avenue and how we looked at the different driveway arrangements.
Okay, so yeah, and I think we might have a couple of slides on this in the backup area. So we did a separate analysis of what the implications would be if the Hecker driveway was eliminated, and what the change in traffic volumes would be.
Right.
So I do have some specific. I have that. I believe I have that. So I guess the first thing is coming in the, I guess it would be the eastbound direction. there really would be no change because we don't have the left turn in. So for the most part, those travel patterns have been established. So the only difference would be for the traffic ultimately ending up going west. Now, we won't remove all the traffic because it's still destination to the west. Now there's two choices, and the choices are what they are under two driveways, but under one driveway, there'll still be some of those westbound trips that are more likely to be used. So we looked at them, and then we estimated what it would be, and I won't talk about the current office use or the existing office use, because we do have that in our analysis as indicated, but in the westbound direction, the submitted plan with two driveways versus the submitted plan with just the one driveway, there's a difference of 13 trips on Hecker Avenue.
Throughout the peak hour or the whole day?
For the peak hour.
For the peak hour.
Okay. Well, that's for both peak hours. So it's a difference of 8 during the morning peak hour and a difference of 5 during the afternoon peak hour. And then again, as I stated, the eastbound traffic would be essentially the same. And the type of numbers we're talking about, for instance, in the PM, it's when you add in the background traffic, it's 106 trips versus 101. So there is a slight decrease when you take that driveway out. But again, the numbers are all very, very similar.
And just for reference, in the peak hour, we're talking about one extra car every 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can go, into more detail on all of that stuff if you'd like, but
Yeah, please do.
it's the,
Excuse me. Please, we'll give opportunity for the public to make comment, but simply shouting it out is not something that we'll tolerate. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So, thank you. I think that answers it. I would like to hear from the town's peer reviewer. I see him in the audience today. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
State
Craig
your
Del
name.
Rio, professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, and we conducted the peer reviews of the traffic analysis and studies since this project started. There was the original peer review and then 2 subsequent follow-up peer reviews, and that's what we're here today.
For reference, just for the people in the audience who may not know, you're an independent consultant that the town hires to double check or to go over their plan for traffic.
Correct.
We don't just take that and say, yes, this is right. We make sure that some, call it independent set of eyes, looks at it
Right.
and decides that what they're saying is in fact what will happen.
Is accurate, that they're following, the latest
Standards, the
methodologies,
models.
particularly on a Connecticut DOT road, which this project is, and following their methodologies as well. Because right after this, if it's approved by the commission, then it would go to the Office of State Traffic Administration for their review and any comments that they may see. And that will tie in a little bit on what I'm going to say with some of the comments from the LTA, for example, and some of the concerns,
Okay.
as well as our own comments. In a nutshell, they've adequately addressed all the comments, on the 2 peer reviews. Really, this last peer review had to mostly do with a couple of the turning movement radius for trucks and just making sure that it's safe and efficient, not only on-site, but more importantly, on and off of Boston Post Road. There were no issues found with the turning movements on and off of Hecker. They satisfied all the responses to the comments. They also satisfied the LTA's concerns, and I attended a November 21st meeting at the LTA Commission, answered their questions, and also just confirmed, like I'm confirming here tonight, that the methodologies, that the responses, were adequate and brought everything up to our standards. There was nothing really majorly wrong in the first place. It was really a little bit of tweaking on the traffic study report, just to really just bring it up to a smoother operation, and also a stronger traffic study to illustrate, for example, what would happen with and without Hecker Avenue as a secondary access. And jumping a little bit ahead, the finding on that was, we agree on that 8 and 5 that he just mentioned. It makes sense when you start to distribute all the trips. You're not going to eliminate every trip on Hecker. Some people, especially depending on the conditions on 95, are going to backtrack and prefer to go that way. Your Google Maps will tell you to go that way, for example, in certain times. Overall, less traffic on weekdays, right? It is a lesser of a generator overall during weekdays than an office use. What you do see is certain movements will have higher volumes in the morning and the afternoon because the traffic's going in different directions. So for example, residential is peaking on the exit, right? Everybody's leaving this proposed development and going to work, while the current situation is the peak in the morning is entering. So the exit volumes you'll see a little higher in the morning, and then the entrance volumes you'll see a little higher in the evening. But overall, traffic on the streets and the network is less than what's generated by the office, and in particular during lunch. Residential developments don't generate a lot of traffic. In fact, we often don't even study the midday peak like we do for office use or retail, for example. We always look at the lunchtime use for those. But residential is so light in that condition. So from an overall daily basis, it's also a little less traffic. So we went over the patterns, and then really this last review was about the turning movement templates and some of the updates to the site plan that Dave just went over. The location, we had some concerns originally over how the trucks would access and get to those trucks and areas, the loading zones. They've addressed that now. We've reviewed that. They've also addressed the turning movements where some of them, it wasn't even really, it was so slight to begin with, but they fixed it anyway. The truck turning movements internally and then externally. I think the right turn out of the site onto Post Road might still be just barely going over the right lane as it turns out. But making that radius any wider is a trade-off with the pedestrian crossing that they've narrowed and improved on the sight lines and everything, if you remember that. Yep. So for now, I would recommend leaving it. OST is going to review this anyway. It's their purview, it's their road. If they say, hey, we'd like this...
Change it a little bit, then we'll change it.
It's a very simple change. It's a feasible change. There's nothing... so that's the trade-off, and if they ask for it, they can easily do it and accommodate it. I think that's basically it, so if there's any other specific questions.
So were you able to take a look at the response that the applicant put forth today?
I just took a look at it this morning and on my phone as I got out of the car.
Right.
But Jeremy had a couple of printouts, so I was just looking at it now.
And they know that they appear to satisfy
Yeah,
your
exactly.
comments? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say you have sign-off
Yeah.
in the same way we would get a normal letter type of thing?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And just to reiterate, not just the findings on the Hecker only sort of curb cut, no curb cut study we just heard from, all the other studies about, we saw at the last hearing, they had a very detailed plan about how many left trips they would think would come out of Thorndale, how many rights, how many lefts going in, all of those different types of traffic studies. In
Right.
your independent analysis, you also agree with those numbers?
Yeah, the assignments and the distribution of the trips, it all made sense. They also made some accounting for the development across the street, which is only partially occupied. They did
Yep.
some trip estimates as if it was fully occupied. They
Yep.
threw that onto the background. So yeah, everything has been updated.
Can you, for the benefit of the people in the audience, highly summarize the analysis as far as an office use
Yep.
that is in its current state 69% occupied, an office use as if it was fully, this proposed project, and then that layer of new volume that we know is going to come on the roadways from Corbin? Can you kind of just high level summarize the methodologies that were used on that
Yes.
sequencing?
Sure.
Right.
So they did the traffic counts to get the background traffic, right? However, not only is, the office development in Thorndale partially occupied, new development across the street is also partially occupied. Well, it's really no different than we would do if they said, let's take a third site that we knew was going to be redeveloped and it's vacant today and they were going to build offices and they told me that we were going to put 100,000 square feet of office there. We would go to what we always quote, the ITE Trip Generation Manual, which is, it's not only a national standard, it's also Connecticut DOT. If we tried to do it any other way for a project that involves DOT, they would say, where's the trip generation from ITE? Right, they would ask for that, because that's the proper standard methodology. So they basically took the square footage left from the office use and applied the standard trip generation rates, as well as the development across the street. So that's how they accounted for all that. And then they brought that up as if everything were fully occupied.
Okay, and was there another additional layer or consideration of a layer that is going to happen outside of the bounds of Darien, meaning Wegmans?
So I don't remember what the other projects were that were accounted for, but, they reached out to the planning department and said, are there planned projects that need to be accounted for within the study area? And those were incorporated.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, when you say the project across the street, are you talking about Corbin or?
Yeah, Corbin. Phase 2, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Across the highway, across the street?
Yeah.
Down the
Exactly.
road, half a mile?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I doubt we'll see any impact from Wegmans. That's a little far away.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, once it gets beyond a certain distance, they also apply what's called the background growth
noise
rate.
just goes up.
Right? When that we bounce off of from Connecticut DOT, they have a bigger picture of how things are changing over the years and the trends.
Okay.
And I think it was a 0.5% or 0.4 per year for this project was applied, and that sort of catches all, other developments because it's a trend line.
And they did account for that?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
How often are these models updated?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but they're pretty frequent. It's a pretty, in my experience, a fairly active updating.
So we're not looking at something like a diminished number because the last update was in 2020,
Correct,
right, when
correct,
nobody was
yeah.
driving kind of thing? It's
Yeah,
back to
they're very current.
normal
Yeah,
everyday
as a matter of
volume.
fact, I bet you if I go back a year or two, I can probably see for other peer reviews we've done that it might have changed a
A
little.
little bit, yeah. Okay. Just wanted, because I think that's important too.
Yeah.
We're seeing more traffic, obviously, throughout the years, but, you could certainly see the government having some outdated model, every 5 years or something, and then we get the COVID.
Yeah, they have a lot of, data points that they do permanent traffic counts
Yeah.
throughout the state, so that's what they use to.
Okay.
I would like to, sorry, go ahead. Ask me.
Mike, sorry, George.
No, it's all right.
Just going to ask if you could go through the legal traffic authority's comments, specifically their comments on page 2 of their letter. I'm a big fan of getting it right the first time rather than trying to fix it after the fact. And some of what they talk about is if these become problems, we can rectify them after the fact. I'd like to understand if you think that these are sort of credible problems with the plan presented, if there's changes we should be making to address them now.
Yeah.
And then their final comment, which is, a possible recommendation here would be to make the driveway on Hecker Ave exit only.
Yep.
So the first sort of 4 comments and then that statement. And if you
Yep.
could just go through those for me, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously from these comments, it's about response time and, public safety. Of course, they've done everything they can to sort of prohibit or restrict the eastbound left turns into the new driveway by putting the curb with the deflectant, and so that it makes it very hard. I mean, it's a narrow road, so you're almost making a U-turn to try and get in there. It's going to be very hard. So, that's a tough turn, but they have it in there in case there's consistent violations and safety concerns. The next step would be, all right, I can't make the U-turn, so I'm going to go to the police department, and they already have issues with spillover from the library. If you've seen that they put out new sort of sandwich signs saying, stay off of my property, basically, don't use my driveway. They're concerned with making broken U-turns to get back and then go in that driveway. So that would be the second movement that they're concerned about. And then there's traffic buildup at the Hecker signal on Post Road itself, right? So, that would cause delays in response time if that buildup was worse than it is today. And the last bullet just wraps that all up, any conditions that may impact police response times, right? So if the worst thing that could happen is what they say and make it an exit only, you're kind of where we were with the exercise that they did when they said no Hecker at all, right? Because we found out that the volumes don't change that much. So, entry-wise, we've already assumed that entry from the eastbound movement is closed because we're wrapping them around. We didn't sign them in because we're saying you can't make that left. So therefore, the only trips that you need to reassign would be anybody coming off Post Road, going up Hecker and making the right into it. That would just be reassigned to Thorndal if that was an exit only. So, and again, those volumes are...
Is that something you typically see as a retroactive change in?
It's not too
What would
common.
the process be for that if there was?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's not too common because a lot of developments don't have a police department right adjacent to it. But we do see this every now and then from a fire department or any emergency response from a hospital or an ambulance, wherever we see that, this type of questioning and checking comes up.
So sort of the same question asked a little bit differently. Are there any changes you would make to the plan to address these, right? Like the illegal U-turn through a police station seems like a terrible idea to begin with, but
Right.
is there a change to the plan that could be made to address that, or have we addressed that as well as we can?
I think we've exhausted all the possibilities. I mean, we've looked at it with no Hecker, we've looked now at a Hecker exit only, and then, what they're proposing, which is a restricted movement driveway.
And I guess just to follow up on that, my biggest concern obviously is response time of the police officers and build up on Hecker at that traffic light if they're trying to get to 95 or the Post Road or downtown. Is there a retroactive, I guess the retroactive fix is just close that exit, right?
Correct.
It's pretty draconian, but, and then I guess in that instance, the applicant would have to figure out turning radiuses and other things for apparatus if they were using that as part of any of their fire apparatus?
I don't think it would have, well, yeah, maybe because of the they probably need to do like a cul-de-sac turnaround where the driveway continues.
Yeah.
That might be the only change, just to give yourself space, because you're right, that one movement where the driveway turns into a driveway to exit would now be a dead end.
So they have
And
to
there
move.
may be some accommodations that you need to,
But there are ways to manage that on site.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to take a look. I don't know what it is with the wetlands and everything and what exactly is left there, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but, I'm pretty sure that could be accommodated.
Okay.
I mean, it should be investigated just to make sure.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, just to dot the I and cross the T, I would take a look at that and make sure that design alternative is there in case that needs to be closed. So that's a good point to be made.
George?
Okay, if I could, just on our same favorite subject of the Hecker cut. First, so I understand they're going to have this island which will favor the right-hand turn exit and the right-hand turn entrance and exit, I guess, right? So they're going to have this island thing, and one of the things I've liked about the cut at Hecker is that it is a second way for emergency equipment to get in there.
Correct.
But that coming from Norotan Avenue, where we have what really two fire houses. Anyway, that could be tough, right? Isn't it? Does that make it more difficult to have a fire truck entering the project from Hecker Avenue?
So it's mountable, so the trucks can go over it. So it won't have like a hard 90-degree curb. It'll have a, you know, a mountable curb,
I
slanted
see.
curb,
Okay,
so that they can go over it.
okay, I get it, all right.
Yeah.
And so the other thing, because I like the idea of the second access, I have also been thinking, because of some public impact we have had, about just making it accessible only for emergency vehicles. And so I just wanted to get you on the record as to taking devil's advocate position. What's the downside? Because it sounds like there are very few vehicles coming through there at any peak or non-peak time. So what's the downside of closing that exit and entrance?
So in general, we mentioned this last time a little bit too, you know, it's not always the case. Sometimes there's issues why you wouldn't want to, but especially when you have, you know, frontages on two roads, dispersing traffic is always, you know, not a bad goal to have, right? So that not everything is going to one point, but it's being spread out. So that's in general. In this particular case, those trips without that driveway are actually, and it might sound minor, but it's really not, right? Would have a longer trip to get into the driveway. So if you're going to Norotan and you did some shopping, or you come from the train station and you're coming in down Hecker, now you've got to go to a light, you've got to make a left. Now you've got to go to an unsignalized intersection and make another left, and then travel further because you're the last unit that could have gone out Hecker in, you know, 10 seconds. So I think those are two things to consider that makes it beneficial to keep the second one open.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Two quick questions. So if the LTA does determine that the response times have increased, and what would the notification process be? And in your opinion, how long would that process be?
I'm not sure. That may be a question back to the town as far as making the, you know, how the mechanism for closing that, changing it.
Has the town ever done that, to your knowledge?
The only time, we typically have a provision in many of the P&Z approvals, maybe all of them, which is if any data submitted is not correct, proves to be false, the commission has the right, after notice and hearing, to modify, revoke the permit, whatever it is. The only time I can recall it coming up was about 30 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, when Avalon came in. They got their approvals, an issue after the fact came up, and the commission had various hearings relative to that one issue. So that's how I would guess it could happen. If the LTA, because they'd be right there, the police is right there, sends a letter, a memo, hey, based on what we've seen, here's some of the problems that have occurred, whatever they may be. Commission, take a look at it. So the commission could then have a public hearing based on if that condition gets put in your approval. Have a hearing. Let's hear more about, get us data, evidence, whatever information you would need to better understand, or you may have experience at that time. Oh yeah, I was out there and I saw whatever, or traffic counts, whatever may happen. Then you could then do what? Examine alternatives.
And presumably, since the police station is right next door, they would be a little more attuned to this, since during the peak hours that we're talking about, where cars will be entering this, is typically going to be the peak hours where police shifts are changing and they're leaving the station. So the ones on the road experiencing firsthand are most likely going to originate from the police station just by the nature of its proximity, right?
I would guess that to
So
be the case.
versus something on the other, up by the Merritt Parkway, somebody might call, the cops might go out there, the cops are going to be neighbors, so presumably any issues would be dealt with very quickly. Okay.
And just
Yep,
one more
yep.
quick, as far as public school buses, is that up to the school district to determine whether they'll be entering the roadways within the property, or if that?
From what I understand, that the Board of Ed if the project gets approved, would make a determination based on, so I think there's, well, I don't want to guess, but they'll either stop on Thorndal, on Hecker, maybe both. I guess it depends where the students are, and how many go to the schools, et cetera. But I think it would be rare for them to drive through a project down a road like that. Just
When we did Parklands, the bus stop was expected to be at the very end of it, so the school
Right.
buses weren't going to go all the way to the back of Parklands, loop
Right.
it around and come out. The kids were just going to have to hoof it the
right, similar to
quarter mile.
Kensett. You could think of Kensett, there's 75 units there. Instead of winding their way through the private driveway, they just stop
come
at
to
the
the end,
corner
yeah.
and the kids come out.
Okay, that's what thank you.
Right. And that's partially the reason we did make the comments. I mean, we would have made them anyway, but the internal circulation, the first go-around was a little broken as far as the pedestrian, and that's what Dave just went over. That's been, now there's a constant, consistent pedestrian network within the facility that gets you to both Hecker and Boston Post Road.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions for Mr. Del Rio? Okay, great. I see the applicant chomping at the bit.
Yeah, sure, and Dave Sullivan can help me out here to the extent necessary. I think just a couple of items that came up that we'd love to respond to now before we hear more comments that we'll have to respond to. I think the LTA's comments, and Mr. Netter, to your point, that this list of, well, what could happen. I think it's important to recognize first that the LTA endorsed the study that we prepared that would say these issues will not come to pass, and Greg Del Rio also agreed that these issues will not come to pass. Just one example that I want to put up, that Dan put up on the screen here, is your question about the impact on Hecker Avenue. What will this increase wait times for police or anyone else on the Hecker Avenue Boston Post Road intersection? And what you see on top are wait times before the project, and what you see on the bottom are wait times after the project. Wait times actually go down a little bit, but what we can say, there will not be any change in wait times at that intersection.
Can you just read those for the record?
Sure, absolutely. So in the background condition, which is without the project and assuming growth, et cetera, an AM delay of 32 seconds is expected, and 16 is expected in the afternoon. When you assume Thorndale is up and running, there'll be a delay in the AM of 31.7, and in the PM a 16-second delay.
And for reference, this is leaving Hecker, making a left or right.
Yeah,
on
correct.
Post
Leaving
Road.
Hecker,
This
making
has
a
nothing to
left or
do
right.
with going, it's just the light,
Correct,
trying to get
correct.
out.
This is the light,
What's
right.
what's the wait time?
Exactly, correct. So no impact on that whatsoever. And as Jeremy mentioned, this may be something that makes its way in as a condition of approval. If that's something that you all think is appropriate, we certainly understand that and stand by our analysis that these things will not come to pass. And we've adequately accounted for trip generation and where folks will be going and what time they'll be going there. In terms of a fire truck getting in on Hecker Avenue that Mr. Riley asked for, I think the fire truck, what will happen is they'll be coming north on the Post Road, they'll take a left on Hecker Avenue, and then they'll be turning right into the site, so they won't have to make the left turn that none of us will be allowed to make, I would say. And I just would point out that we had several conversations with Fire Marshal Bush about making sure that trucks could not only get in the site, but get around the site to his satisfaction, and he signed off on that facet of the project too. In terms of, what these, again, we don't think these these negative things will happen, but Chick-fil-A is an example. They were put in traffic jail in Norwalk when traffic conditions proved to be too much over there. This is not Chick-fil-A. This is a residential community, and I would just go back to the point that if you're concerned about traffic, what you want to see is fully max capacity office build out. No longer an option. You want to see medical office, no longer an option, and you want to have traffic distributed at 2 points of in and out rather than having all that office traffic just coming in and out on Thorndal Circle. Because what that turns into is that makes a rough traffic condition for the entire Darien community and anyone who travels through Boston Post Road, not just for a specific neighborhood. So, and then school bus question, I think Ms. Zionic, you asked, that is something that the Darien Public Schools, we'd work with them to set that up. It would depend on how many kids are here and what schools they're enrolled in. Again, only 19 kids we expect to be here at the most, so pretty low number. We anticipate, well, not anticipate, if this neighborhood were here today, they'd be enrolled at Tokeneke Elementary School for the elementary level. And there are bus stops on Hecker Avenue right now. As I mentioned, with the fire truck right now, as Craig mentioned a moment ago to me, the bus drives north on the Post Road, turns left on Hecker. So kids would be the door opens on the north side of the road where our 2 or 3 kids would be at bus time. So those are the specific items that I wanted to address just at this point while they were fresh in our head. So,
Does anybody have any questions? Going down, Amy or Jay? Hands up. Go to public.
I think that's what I had.
Okay. Mr. Nutter?
Good.
Mr. Riley? Ms. Zionic? Okay, great, thank you. At this point, I would like to open up the public hearing to any persons in the general public that would like to come up and provide comment. Please, is anybody here like to offer comment? Sure, sir, welcome.
I guess I'll start.
Please, just come up, state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Mike Sawicki, Hecker Avenue. I guess residents of Hecker Avenue and Freight Court were invited to a meeting, preliminary meeting. I think Jay and several of these other people invited us to a introductory meeting for what the project was all about. And it was nice, had some nice pastries and everything, thanks. But anyway, one of our big concerns was the cut onto Hecker Avenue. And at that time, I'm not sure if it was somebody, one of the residents or one of the development team suggested maybe putting in a gate for that Hecker Avenue cut, so it's only used for emergency use. So I think Mr. Riley just brought it up there before. I'm not sure how often you people have talked about that or how serious that is, but I would hopefully think that you guys would consider that very seriously to reduce some of the traffic on Hecker Avenue. The other thing I just thought about, being I live on Hecker Avenue, have you guys talked to Post 53? Because I know they come from, their office down Hecker Avenue onto the Post Road all the time. So I'm not sure if they had to get into the development, how that cut would affect them or not affect them, or if they have to go into the Post Road and up Thorndal Circle there. So once again, our main concern is, the cut onto Hecker Avenue and do something about that for the residents, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks. Have you guys talked to Post 53 about any their access? Okay.
Would anybody else from the general public like to provide comment for the record?
I would.
Oh.
Excuse me. Kathleen Browning.
Don't worry.
On Warner Drive.
Yeah, you need to come up to the microphone. Sorry.
So sorry.
Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kathleen Browning from Warner Drive on the corner of Hecker. I really would like to know how they come about with the traffic on Hecker. So I'd like to see the result instead of them just saying, oh, we did this survey and so and so and so, so it's fine.
So their traffic study is part of the public record.
Where's that at?
On the
And what they do,
viewpoints.
did they do like the actual thing that you run over the?
With the application, yes. It's very detailed. It's like a 200-page traffic study. It's part of the record. They've revised it several times based on comments from the town's peer reviewer as well. But this is all public information, so you can certainly sign into the, it's called the Viewpoint site where the electronic application is, and you can see and download this study, and you can see how everything is outlined. So it's not just them saying some numbers and we hope it's right. It's a very detailed analysis. Same
Okay,
goes
so
for
you say Viewpoint, where is that? Tell me where.
opengov.com.
Okay.
Same for, we're not talking about it here, but at a prior hearing, we heard from our town's peer reviewer, Mr. Canis, about flooding and about drainage. There's also a very detailed 100 and change page drainage report that's part of the application as well. And any document that we've discussed in any of the hearings is also part of the public comment, which is on that site, as well as any public comment that's been submitted via email or via letter to the Planning and Zoning Office.
Okay, because like I am on that corner all the time, and I see a ton of traffic, so I'm trying to figure out how they're saying it's going to be fine.
Yes, it's detailed in their traffic report. which is online.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Maybe we could have the applicant
Can you,
explain what they studied as far as the traffic report.
okay, sir,
Yeah, thanks.
welcome.
Oh, thanks. Good to be back here again. My name is William Freight, also a Hecker Avenue resident, 47. So I have heard repeatedly these numbers for Hecker Avenue use during peak hours. And if I'm hearing it correctly, it's 13 cars during peak hours.
13 additional cars over the 2 peak hours. So 1 peak hour in the morning, 1 peak hour in the evening. And the peak hour is just the 60-minute window where most traffic occurs. We don't say, or they don't say, 8 to 9 a.m. is the peak hour. The peak hours just might be 7:52 to 8:52 or 8:04 to 9:04. That wherever there's the most traffic,
Right.
that's when they'll add some 13 additional, half in the morning, half in the evening, basically.
Okay.
And
And
stop me
it-
if I'm wrong, if you're referencing the number 13, Greg, stop me if I'm wrong, that's the difference between just not doing Hecker cut and doing Hecker cut. So it's not just what the project's going to create. The project's not going to only create 13 new. It's the difference on Hecker if you have a cut or not have a cut.
Right, so
Okay, I
with
just
the,
wanna make sure you understand that, what that
so with
represents.
the curb cut, it's an additional 13 cars split on the AM and PM hours. So to my mind, the project hasn't made the case for a need for that curb cut. It just isn't there. I haven't heard yet a number for the entire daytime coming and going off of Hecker Avenue. And I know, the focus should be on the AM and PM hours, but, I mean, I don't think the case has been made by this team that there's a need for that curb cut. I do understand Mr. Riley's thoughts on the fire access and emergency access. And it seems to me, from my understanding, that there could be a gate that can be remote control operated by the fire department as they approach that entrance, should they need to get in through a gate. There's a coding thing that they're capable of doing. So, the idea of a school bus stop on that corner, even briefly, doesn't seem very safe to me. I know that we have school bus stops down the street. I don't think we need a road there for a school bus stop. I think the school bus could stop on the side of the road like they do at the different residents, down the street, should they feel that that's a safe place to pull over, even for the, I think you mentioned 3 kids to be picked up off of that end of the project, by a bus. I know that you guys look at the curb cut, no curb cut, the traffic generated, the traffic flows. I understand the idea of not wanting to impede people coming and going from that place, but it seems to be, by their own declaration, a very, very minimal use, right turn in, right turn out. And I think for what it does to our community, in that we are already dealing with a traffic load from the library, which is a public use. I understand, we're going to have traffic on Hecker Avenue, with the police department and the library. Well, the library serves the whole town. This residential project, doesn't serve the whole town to have a curb cut for 13 cars. It just doesn't make sense to me. And if there's a burden of proof that these guys are demonstrating to show a need for that curb cut, I haven't heard it been made in my mind. So that's I think pretty much what I wanted to say on that. The fact that this is heavily monitored at Thorndale because it's emptying onto a state highway, I get there's a lot of scrutiny on that one. And I just hope we have the same amount of scrutiny as a residential street that already has a traffic impact, as I said, from the library. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Point being made for the third or fourth time since I've been at this meeting.
Thank you.
So anyway, thanks for your attention to
I
that.
appreciate it. Would anyone else from the general public like to provide comment? Welcome. Come on up.
My name is
Oop.
Keely Christie.
Sorry, just wait. Did you pick that up, Bridget?
Keely?
Yes.
Welcome,
Keely
and your
Christie.
address?
105 Hoyt Street.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me. I haven't been to one of these meetings before, and I had heard that this large apartment complex was being proposed, and so I just had some questions, so I'm not sure. I guess my concern is that before it was office traffic, so it was mostly Monday through Friday, a huge influx in the morning and outflow at the end of the business day. So I guess my concern as a Darien resident of many, many years is now with the project going on downtown and multi-use properties and the downtown with all the residents on weekends, now you have 175 more units with, I don't even know how many cars you're considering per housing unit, but if there were 2 cars per unit, you're talking another 300 and, what is that? Whatever, 400, 350, 400 more cars in a half a mile from the downtown. So I'm wondering how that really will feel as a resident trying to get around, especially we've had congestion problems in the past, so I can only imagine this is going to even further burden Saturday, Sunday traffic downtown. So I hope when you're making decisions, I know we're listening to, them leaving in the morning and arriving at night, but what does Darien look like after if this were to be approved? And I guess the other part, and again, I don't know because it's planning and zoning, but is this where we take into account revenues received at all?
We don't look
at
consider
the impact on the town from that standpoint.
We can't consider it in any way.
Okay, that's what my question was then. And at what point is that considered as far as if it's?
I think when it gets the certificate of occupancy, it'll go to the Board of Finance to then
Right, how much
be
they
assessed.
pay in taxes?
Well, it's not so much that, it's the burden on the system, on the school system. And if you have 175 units, and we have very good schools, fortunately, here in Darien, what is the impact on the school system? And will the hopefully added, because right now, as office buildings, there are no kids going to school.
So we looked
so
at,
there's no,
in a prior public hearing, we looked at the number of students that are going to be added to this. And it came, and I believe it was Mr. Flaherty, gave a detailed analysis that's also part of the public record, the study about the number of school-age children that this should generate, and it's about 19. And then in past, they provided testimony at our last hearing that the model that they used to get to that 19 number which they use for the Avalon, which they use in a couple other site developments in other towns, proves to be basically very, very accurate. So
It does,
might be
okay.
18, might be 20, but we're not going to expect to see 50 students in here, for example.
Okay, so if we have seen prior history with Avalon and,
Right. A lot of it is
Being
based upon
true.
the type of unit you're building. So for example, one-bedroom units have very, very few children.
right,
Two-bedroom units,
Maybe
a little more. Three-bedroom units, more than that. And that's what we've seen generally is three-bedroom units generate more than two, and two
Right.
generate more than one, and studio are in effect zero. So they have a mix of units and they analyzed it based on that mix.
okay.
But
So
that study's
with
also
that,
part
and
of
you're
it.
saying that that has proven to be very accurate in the past. So we, based on that history, we only expect another 18 to 20 students, 17 to 20.
Yep.
So do we know if the revenues that we will receive is enough to support at least that many students?
Legally, the Planning and Zoning Commission
Can't do
in the
that.
state of Connecticut does not allow that analysis.
It doesn't.
You can't deny it based on it's going to cost us more for something. Some states might, but Connecticut does not.
Okay.
We
And
get-
who
similarly,
does
we-
take that into consideration? What board or whatever, that if it's going to cost?
It's provided as a right. It's the same way we couldn't say, well, if there's more people here, that would cost more police or more fire. We can look at it and say, can the fire trucks get in and access it, and can it be safe? But we can't look at it from a use case and say, okay, this will add more. Those services, education, police, fire, have to be provided as a right. So the
I
same
can
way,
underst-
if you had a one-bedroom house and then you tore it down and built a five-bedroom house, we couldn't just say, well, you can't do that because now you'll have put 3 kids in the school and that's sort of like maxed out. The school would just have to find a way to fund another teacher.
So if I can offer to you and to anybody else that has this as a concern, the Planning and Zoning is about to embark on a plan of conservation and development. It's done every 10 years. We've hired an outside service, and one of the things that we've, as a commission, has asked them to add into that analysis is exactly that, a capacity analysis. Is Darien reaching its capacity with regards to fire and sewer and, drainage and roadways and traffic? And it's one thing that we've asked to layer into our plan. In that process, there's going to be a lot of community outreach with regards to surveys and workshops, and I highly encourage the community to get involved when those times come and make your voice heard about what is the future planning for the next 10 years for the town. Okay?
That document guides how our decisions are made, how we change regulations, how we change zoning codes as well. So it's done every 10 years, so we're on the update for it. It should be kicking off in January, I think.
Great.
Yes.
So just kind of circling back then, with this particular project, did zoning have to be changed in order to allow a $175 or unit apartment building versus its current use?
Yes, we had a public hearing and we changed the zoning code in
So it's
July.
already a done deal. That part is done.
Just to be clear, we didn't change the zoning code. We
Added an overlay.
Overlay zone on this type of zoning environment, right? So in this zone, there is an ability to make an application, which the applicant did, to land an overlay zone that allows for multifamily.
Okay, so at that point, you determined that it's okay to have residential properties on that land, that's a good thing for Darien to add that overlay.
That is correct.
Okay, and so you as a zoning have decided that this is a good thing for Darien, this,
I personally, as a commissioner, voted for that, yes.
okay, well, I hope you're right.
I do too.
Well, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the public like to provide comment? Sir, welcome.
Good evening. Would it be all right if we pull up the site plan?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
If you could just provide your name and address for the record.
My name is Rolf Oben. I live at 9 Archer Lane, Darien.
Welcome.
I've spoken to the commission previously, so I apologize for my redundancy. But since our last meeting, I've received quite a bit of feedback from a number of people, both in person and in email, and they are have quite a bit of anxiety about this project, and in particular the access on Hecker Avenue. I'm getting my developments mixed up here. So part of the feedback has been about, and the previous person who spoke has touched upon it, is the amount of development that's already either been completed or is in progress, and how many apartments are already being added to the town from those previous approvals. And just running through quickly: Parkland Drive, Darien Commons, Corbin District, Heights Crossing, and now we're talking about Thorndal Circle. Now, one of the comments that I did receive was that all of those developments are rentals, apartment rentals. And I think that's part of their concerns, because in the present day plan of conservation, it calls for a diversity of housing, and for so much development to occur that are all strictly rental apartments, to me that doesn't send much of a message that we are really developing diversity of housing, other than maybe recently we allowed for auxiliary housing within private yards, okay? So that's, I think, a void in what's occurring right now. I don't think the town of Darien has actually executed the construction of a condominium since the 1980s. And there is a gentleman in Greenwich who is applying in Greenwich to do just that, put up condominiums, okay, for people to buy, okay? And that's another thing. The rentals are just what they are. You just keep paying the landlord, whereas in a condominium, you're investing in something that hopefully is going to gain equity. So that's another issue that is apparent, as we see it, lacking. Maybe this will come up in the next plan of conservation, that we want to have diverse housing, and we'll see where we end up with that. The overlay zoning, DO overlay zone, has defined 55 acres of land that qualifies under that overlay zone. Between parkland and this application, you're looking at about 15 acres of land. So that leaves 40 more acres out there of office space, office property, that could be applied for in similar manner to this application. One particular one that comes to my mind is on Northwestern Avenue, not far from, Tokeneke Road, not far from Tokeneke Elementary School. And that's on Tokeneke Road, which is a state road, so that adds a whole other element to the equation. But I would like to ask for more consideration of the fact that precedence has already been set with Parkland. It'll be further set with this application if approved as submitted. And to me, I think that's sending a message out to developers. Come on in, whatever you got on your mind and on your plan, you're probably going to get it, okay? And I don't think, in general, given some of the circumstances with this application, that's something everybody's necessarily comfortable with, okay? So I would like to see a review of that overlay. That would be in my own opinion, because so far the parklands that did not go well. That ended up having to be in a settlement situation, and so that was and that has yet to even begin construction. And I heard something about how the new owner wants to come in for some changes. So there seems to be an ongoing issue with that particular application. So it appears to me that the overlay zone is off to a very difficult start. One thing about this application, the neighbors in general are not necessarily arguing against their right to develop the site. No one has said, oh, no, this should never happen. No one's really saying that. What we are saying is stay within the boundaries of the property without a curb cut on Hecker Avenue. Build whatever you're going to build, okay? The lawyer said at one point, we could, within our rights, put in another 20,000 square feet of apartment space. Fine. Just keep it within the confines of Thorndal Circle, and please do not impose this curb cut on Hecker Avenue, okay? Traffic study says that the overall number of traffic trips would be less for residential versus office. However, they did not say that some traffic would, they did say that some traffic would shift to Hecker Avenue away from Thorndal, particularly during peak hours. Hecker will evolve to be the primary ingress-egress for the development. If overall the traffic is less, then what is the necessity for the Hecker Avenue curb cut? Okay? Again, I would echo what Mr. Freight said, and that is, I don't think they've really made the case. And if we look at what's going on here, this is Hecker Avenue, entrance, ingress, egress. You've got 1, 2, 3 buildings that are on the southwest section of the property. Okay, so I look at all of these vehicles that are, in my humble opinion, going to gravitate to that Hecker Avenue ingress, egress. Okay? And it's going to render Thorndal to be far less trafficked than what it has been in the past. And that's part of the concern that the neighbors have. If not the concern that the neighbors have. In my own case, I live on Archer Lane. I'm not closely located per se to the site, but we are affected by the traffic on Hecker Avenue. I've spoken before about our white knuckle experience turning onto Hecker Avenue from Fitch Avenue. That was not addressed in any traffic report that I read. It appears that my attempt to get the attention of the local traffic authority was a failure. You mentioned the upcoming plan of conservation and that a town capacity analysis is being considered to be conducted in conjunction with the redrafting of the plan of conservation. I think that's excellent. I just hope it shows that we are not beyond capacity and that all of this development is sustainable. I would like to talk about this discussion about emergency secondary access to the site. That can be accomplished without a formal road. I mean, there are numerous plots of land throughout town where there is an emergency access, but it is not a formal road per se, but it does allow access in an emergency situation. And I don't see why that cannot be considered in this situation, in this application. Okay, so again, I'm sorry to be repetitive, but I said this last time, I consider the Hecker Avenue curb cut as an amenity to their site plan. It is not necessarily a necessity, okay, or they haven't, at least I haven't been convinced of it. Drivers, there's another thing was touched on earlier as well. When they're coming down that Hecker Avenue towards the site from Norotan Avenue, and they come around that curve and they see that they can't make the left or that they're not supposed to make that left, there too again, I am very concerned, as are others, about them turning into the police station, which I agree would be a dumb move, or more concerning, into the library. Just use that as a big, nice, convenient U-turn location and go back to the entrance on Hecker. So that is a continuing concern that I have. Okay, this also is interesting. The local traffic authority said that, well, if it doesn't work, we'll re-examine the problems when they occur and read the complaints, and we'll see what we can do to straighten it out. Well, in my opinion, by that time, the cat's out of the bag. The curb cut's there. The traffic's going in and out of Hecker. It's a done deal, unless you're going to shut it all down, okay, which was discussed earlier. But I would rather not get there. I don't want to go there in the first place. I don't want to have to send letters and complaints that get ignored at the local traffic authority, like I did with the white knuckle experience coming off of Heights Road. Okay. So this is my last point. I think that there seems to be a list of boxes that everybody's interested to check off. The Environmental Protection Commission, check. Concurring traffic studies, check. The, whatever, Architectural Review Board, check. Okay, so one check that I don't think you have is a check for the box that represents the support from the residents of the area in general and from the residents of Darien in general. I don't think there's a lot of support for this, not in its present state. I think everybody understands that it should be done. No one's arguing that point, as I made earlier, but this Hecker Avenue curb cut is really a bridge too far. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Would you like to come up and make another comment?
Thanks. So one of the things...
Please just state your name for the record. And
Yeah. William Freight, back again. Just a second thought. And this has to do with the access to I-95. The right-hand turn out onto Hecker Avenue would potentially take people up the street to the northbound entrance of I-95. It turns out that the trip to a northbound exit is quicker if you go down Thorndale and go across the street and get on northbound. So sending people down Hecker to get on northbound, it makes more sense to the residents themselves to go down Thorndale and cross the post road and get on the same northbound. And again, as far as southbound goes, to go to the Norotan Avenue traffic light and then a second light where the exit is off of I-95 and then up to the next light to get on southbound, it again is a quicker trip to go down Thorndale and go under the thruway bridge and turn left on Ledge Road. It's actually a quicker entrance for both northbound and southbound to use the Thorndale access. So it's just another point of what's the benefit to sending traffic down residentially through Hecker Avenue. I'll leave it there. I'll keep it brief.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to comment? Ma'am, welcome. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
I will. Cheryl Russell, 18 Fitch Avenue. Before I start, I just want to go back and correct something that somebody said here. First off, the traffic study was done by Tremel Crow on August 18th to the 21st, and the car counter was placed above Warner Drive, between Warner and Fitch. Second off, schools, people asked about the schools. As of now, there are 30 children in Avalon. 15 take the bus or so to Tokeneke, and another 15 to 18 are either driven or walk to the high school and junior high school. So I just want to get that out there. So I'll start. Good evening. I'm Cheryl Russell. I live at 18 Fitch Avenue. I'm starting my 37th year as an RTM member. I have heard from many of my constituents from all the districts I have served and lived in, 3, 6, 5, and now 2. Regarding Tremel Crow's application of 175 apartments in the Thorndal Circle, you are also elected officials of this town, voted on by all the residents, not just by a district. Your constituents voted for you to maintain the Darien's planning and zoning regulations and keep these regulations under control by knowing what is best for Darien and our neighborhoods. I would like to address the concerns I have heard since this application came before you many months ago. The total of 175 apartments, 3 stories high in 5 buildings, 300-plus parking spaces on 11 acres is not conducive for this neighborhood. Trammell Crow has maxed out these 11 acres for their own benefit. The more they can squeeze on this property, the more beneficial it is for them. We would like to see less buildings and apartments with more green space. There isn't an area for people to gather to talk and sit. There are only a few benches here and there, although I did hear that they may have added some more lately. There are a few benches here and there. No picnic area with grills, other than the clubhouse area on the other side of the complex. There's only a small area for a dog park. Everyone seems to have pets, and we feel this area just isn't large enough. Plus, it's a long way from buildings C, D, and E, which are on the Hecker Avenue side. Will all the residents in those buildings walk their dogs on Hecker Avenue? They have a small walking area around the two large stormwater basins, and people will walk on all the sidewalks, but more green space is needed. The apartment buildings sit right on the sidewalks and the roads, just like New York City. They show pictures of their complex with beautiful trees. However, those trees will take years to grow to the height that they have shown you. Darien is not New York City, and we don't think you, as town planning board, would want any apartment complex to look like New York City. There will be 312-ish parking spaces for 175 apartments. No matter how hard I try, and a lot of other people do too, and we've heard them tonight, to understand the engineer's study stating 22, 28, 15, 3, 4, 5 cars exiting onto Hecker Avenue between 8 and 9 a.m., I can't wrap my head around it. When will all the other people leave this complex during the day? One would think one would have to go to work, drive children to school, go shopping along with many other trips on weekends to sports events, in and out, in and out. When they do leave, they will use the proposed Hecker Avenue curve cut. This will create more traffic in the Hecker Avenue neighborhood. Thorndal Circle entrance and exit off the Post Road worked when these 5 buildings were filled to capacity with employees. There are other buildings that are in the back of the florist that are staying, and I don't think their car count was included in the traffic study. These employees could also use the Hecker Avenue entrance and exit. More cars on Hecker Avenue all day. Mr. Nielsen Sr. never proposed a curve cut on Hecker Avenue for his office park employees. The Thorndal Circle entrance and exit worked for these office buildings and other office buildings and the Nielsen florist for over 40 years. It can work for Trammell Crow's 175 apartments. There is no need to have a curb cut onto Hecker Avenue and ruin a quiet neighborhood. The Police Commission response to the Hecker Avenue curb cut. Now, some of you had discussed this tonight. I would like to know if the Planning and Zoning Commission ever modified, suspended, or revoked an approval application. The Police Commission has given you 4 conditions that could possibly result in you taking that action. However, I believe this would be next to impossible if you grant this application and the project is completed. If in fact the residents of this town find that one or more of the Police Commission's conditions are not met, they can only go to Mr. Ginsburg and not come back to you, the commission, that approved the application. Would we have to request to be on an agenda so you, the Planning and Zoning Commission, understand the public's frustration that the applicant's information proved to be false? Please let us know how the neighbors and residents of Darien could be able to accomplish this. The Police Commission also recommended using Hecker Avenue as an exit only from this complex. This will not help the Hecker Avenue neighborhood, as it will still have more traffic. The town is getting overrun by so many new apartments and traffic. You are elected by the residents of this town, including the residents of Hecker Avenue. Therefore, we ask you to do what is right for the neighbors on Hecker Avenue by taking the following action with this application. Disapprove the Hecker Avenue curb cut, or make it an access road only, as the fire marshal stated in one of his letters that are in the file. Request the applicant to reduce the size of the buildings. That will reduce the number of apartments and cars entering and exiting from Thorndal Circle onto the post road. This will also increase more green space. Or deny this application until the applicant comes back with a more sensible renovation of the Thorndal Circle office park that all Darien residents can embrace. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the general public that would like to provide comment? I'm seeing none. One last time, anyone else? Back row, general public, wants to provide comment? Last chance. Okay. We see no more comment from the general public. I'll bring it up to the applicant. I see we've had some comments about some things we've already gone over. We don't necessarily need to address them, but there's some other stuff that you might want to address.
Sure.
So I'll leave it to you.
Awesome.
For the closing arguments.
Thanks so much. Thanks to all of you for your review of this application, and thanks to our neighbors who have been with us for some time reviewing this project. Before addressing some of the comments that were raised and questions that were raised, I want to kind of start out, maybe not less, these comments may be less for you, but perhaps our neighbors more so. We understand that change is never easy, that change can be difficult. And that's why we work so hard on putting these applications together. That's why the town works so hard in the review of these applications, to make sure that things are done right and to make sure that there's careful, some, I won't say redundant, but thorough review of the key aspects of a zoning application that comes before the town of Darien. And traffic, I know, has been on the top of everyone's mind, so I think it's important to start there. We have looked at traffic every possible way that you can when it comes to this project. Dave Sullivan and his team, I'm not going to go through the record and say how many memos they've put together and how many analyses they've conducted. I'm not going to retell Greg Del Rio's, the several layers of review that he conducted on behalf of the town, not on behalf of the applicant, but on behalf of the town to make sure that Dave Sullivan was correct. I won't retell the several meetings that we had with the chief of police and the local traffic authority, but each of those reviews, if the applicant's word isn't good enough, we have Greg Del Rio, the independent expert retained by the town, and the local traffic authority, all endorsed the traffic analyses that we prepared through the course of this application. And the conclusion always remained the same. There's no adverse impact on traffic safety operations. I think it was Mr. Freight who raised, well, what's the standard when it comes to traffic impact? The standard's clear in your regulations. The standard says when it comes to traffic, the Planning and Zoning Commission's responsibility is to determine, will the proposed application have an adverse condition on traffic safety? And the answer here is no. It does not have that adverse impact when it comes to traffic safety. And we proved that over and over again. Getting rid of the curb cut on Hecker Avenue, it's not something that we want to do. So we looked at, what would the world look like if we had eliminated that curb cut on Hecker Avenue. And we found that there was no benefit to the Hecker Avenue neighborhood. There's not. You're talking about, as Mr. Balgich calculated earlier this evening, a handful of vehicles during a peak hour, a couple every 10 or 12 minutes. I mean, something that we don't perceive when we're looking out our window or driving down the street ourselves. And I think it's important, I guess, if I was going to sum up the Hecker Avenue traffic question, the way I sort of, the message to the town, the message to our neighbors, is that this is not a zero-sum game where a benefit to the future residents of Thorndal Circle or the benefit of folks who are traveling on Boston Post Road, that's not coming at the expense of our neighbors on Hecker Avenue. The evidence before you has proven that over and over again. Your independent review of that evidence has borne that out over and over again. This is a situation where we can provide really the best site plan without causing an adverse impact on our neighbors, on the folks who live on Hecker Avenue. I think it's important to remember that. I think the other important benefit when it comes to traffic impact, I said it when we started this process, if you're concerned about traffic, you want to see more office space come off the market and be replaced with multifamily housing. What you don't want to see is office space remain so that a landlord can market it for full occupancy when there will be greater traffic impact, or a landlord market it for medical office use when there would be significant traffic issues. And if this project is not approved, what would happen is all that office use or medical office traffic would all be coming on through Thorndale and Post Road intersection, which means that's a negative consequence borne by the entire community. This application that's before you has no negative traffic safety impact for not just the greater community, but the Hecker Avenue neighborhood in general. Mrs. Russell discussed, and other folks alluded to the fact that, Trammell Crow's only in this to maximize the build out from cheek to jowl on this property. I think we said it before earlier in the process, but I think it bears repeating at the end here. That is not the case, and we know that because we can compare what Trammell Crow is proposing to what is allowed in the regulations. We are forfeiting 20,000 or so square feet of building area that could be built. That's 40 or so more apartments if we really wanted to. Something that may be relevant to some folks who are neighbors as well. Regulations require that we provide a 50-foot setback to the nearest single-family neighborhood. We're more than doubling that setback that's required. So I think the comment that was made, Trammell Crow doesn't care about us. They're just building as much as they can wherever they can. Well, that's just not true. If that was the case, we'd put a building 50 feet away from our Hecker Avenue westerly boundary as we were entitled to. But that's not the way Trammell Crow has approached this project. Trammell Crow has really worked hand in glove with the town in listening to what's important and providing something that everyone really can be pleased with. The comment that there's not enough open space, I mean, we saw the views from the Eco Parklet that we started out with. That's going to be a terrific amenity, and if folks are looking for a multifamily living opportunity that has some open space to come along with it, I think that's going to be something that when they're looking at options in town, they're going to say, gee, I want to be in the Thorndal Circle neighborhood. That really looks like the place for me. That also ignores the 2.5 acre or 2.4 acres that we're agreeing to protect as a conservation open space area in perpetuity, forever. That space will be untouched because Trammell Crow listened to feedback that they've received throughout this process and incorporated it into the final design. Going back to traffic a little bit and the LTA comments, I think it's important that we be, and maybe this is the lawyer in me, but be precise with our language. The LTA did not say that there is evidence of any of these things happening. In fact, there's no evidence of any of these happening. In fact, the evidence is to the contrary. The evidence shows that none of these things will occur. What the LTA is saying is that we want to retain the authority to review changes in the future, and we encourage the P&Z Commission to retain that authority too. And again, if that's a condition of approval that you all want to incorporate, it's your right to do so. What we are not willing, or what would not be agreeable to us, is either eliminating or revising the Hecker Avenue curb cut as it's been proposed. As I've said before, there's no evidence that that is necessary. There's no evidence that will bring any needed benefit to anyone in the community. Traffic, there are no traffic issues here with regard to this project whatsoever. Residents did mention concerns about Hecker Avenue speeding, and that's why our client said, okay, we'll be happy to stripe the fog lines on Hecker Avenue up to I-95. That's something that if this project is approved, perhaps you will incorporate as a condition of approval in your review. back to, I think, some of the issues that Mr. Oben mentioned in terms of town planning and things of that nature. You know, I think it's worth mentioning that this plan is in conformance with the goals of the overlay zone itself. And we don't have to guess at that or wonder if that's true or not, because we can just look at the language in the DOMR itself, which says it's intended to allow for the conversion or redevelopment of suburban office campuses in the DO zone for multifamily units for rental or for sale. Mr. Oben's not here anymore, but there's no restriction on whether the end user is a homeowner or a renter. I don't think he was encouraging anyone to discriminate against renters, but it's right there in the regulation itself. If the words aren't good enough, you know, Craig Flaherty is here. He was part of the team that wrote that regulation. Some of you who are on the commission voted to approve that regulation. And this application that has been pending before the town for almost a year now has been crystal clear about what we are proposing. And at no point did someone say, hey, wait a minute, you know, before we go too far in looking at this thing, are we sure that it even meets the DOMR standards? Yes, it does, 100%. This project also helps further several other POCD goals that we've talked about, other goals in the housing plan. And, you know, I think those are all well documented in our application materials. I think the one that's worth mentioning is that both the POCD and the housing plan talk about, hey, as a town that, you know, has a finite amount of resources, we want to make sure that when we affirmatively choose to build housing, we're building it in the right place. And one of the ways we know that we're building it in the right place is that we're building in already developed areas. Certainly an office park with 5 buildings that have been there for decades, replete with paved surface area. This is the place for smart redevelopment, and that's what the application before you proposes this evening. The POCD does identify the property as a development opportunity area, which is to be used to help meet the housing needs of the community. And I think the market rate housing that we'll be providing is an important benefit. But also the fact that, and again, something we mentioned earlier in this process, this will be the first project that meets the 14% BMR requirement, something that I think will be important for this project specifically, and a nice milestone as the town continues to lead when it comes to building out a diverse housing portfolio. You know, I think we've, you know, as I said, this has been almost a year-long process. Sometimes things can get contentious between a development team and a regulating entity or development team and the town. We have, I think, done a good job of you know, avoiding that type of situation. I think what we have here instead is an example of the process working. We have an example of thoughtful and careful review undertaken by the town, leading to smart development in our community. The process has worked. This application is doing more than providing homes that are in demand, for sure. There's a lot more than that. There is the conservation easement. That was the result of the EPC's review of this application and some of the feedback we heard from neighbors about maintaining the woods behind their homes on Hecker Avenue. There's the decision to incorporate fog lines on Hecker Avenue. That was, again, the result of conversations, things that we heard from our neighbors, and also conversations with the police department. We didn't mention it tonight, but it's something that, and Tom Daly's here, but it's something that I think is just a really, really great part about this project, the robust stormwater management system that significantly reduces runoff to the Stony Brook, even compared to fresh meadow conditions. That's a result of Joe Canis's careful review of the application, the EPC's careful review of the application, and the town's own regulation when it comes to that important issue. Your colleagues on the Sewer Commission also ensured ample capacity for this project, and your colleagues on the ARB really helped to enhance the overall aesthetic of the project. And lastly, but not leastly, the LTA and Hardesty and Hanover's review assure us that this project will not adversely impact traffic safety conditions in the community. The one sort of common denominator in that list, you know, all these different authorities and reviewing agencies, the common denominator was Trammell Crow's desire to do the right thing and build a really great project. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do if when we believe we earn your approval for this application before you. It's been a long review process. If there are other questions, we're happy to answer them. But I'm looking at our team here. If there's anything else we want to say, I think we've met our burden, and we hope we've earned your support.
I'll open it up to the commission one last time. Go down the line.
I have
Amy?
my questions answered.
Mr. Netter?
I'm good.
Mr. Riley?
Motion.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good as well. So barring that, do I have a motion to close?
Is there a chance for?
Sorry, we closed public hearing. I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing. Amy makes a motion. Jamie makes a second. All those in favor? Hearing's closed. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Okay. Guess we'll give everyone a minute to shuffle out because we know it'll be noisy. Well, time permitting, do we have time permitting, ladies and gentlemen? Go through, it's only 3 and some minutes. And they're pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay? Jay?
Yes, sorry.
Help us clear the room so we can
Yeah, yeah.
get on with the rest of the
Yeah, right. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Okay, moving along into the general meeting, time permitting, I think we've got some time permitting. We have deliberations and possible decisions on the following items. Coastal Site Plan Review number 105, C as in cat, PL-24-152. Daniel and Jaclyn Vene of 15 Weeds Landing. This is a proposal to construct additions and alterations to an existing single-family residence, construction of a new pool, expansion of the driveway and patio area, and to perform related site development activities within a regulated area, including minor regrading and installation of stormwater management. The hearing was closed on November 26, 2024, with a decision deadline on January 30th, 2025. In your packets today, or on Thursday, Mr. Donite provided a draft resolution for this application for 15 Weeds. I wasn't here, but I did watch it on TV 79 for the record. This was straightforward. There was a pool going in. The major concern was the berm, I think, which is covered in Part D, was it? E? Where is it?
Condition A.
A.
No?
No.
B.
B,
Sorry about that,
the
B.
berm, there it is. 50 feet long, but not extending into the flood zone. We got comments from Deep. This was a pretty straightforward application. Anybody have any issues with it? Scrivener's errors, notes, anything you want to add, amend, change, saw that you didn't like about it? Going down the line?
I'm abstaining. I was not here, and I did not watch
Okay.
that one.
Thought that might happen. We discussed earlier. Luckily, I watched it. Mr. Netter?
This was the berm at the end of the drainage outlet for the drainage facility?
Well, you may
Or
recall,
water quality facility?
Gigi Von Schmidt came in,
Yes,
talked about the
okay.
cemetery,
Yes.
and trying to minimize or ensure that no water flows towards the cemetery. And the applicant's engineer said we can do a small berm, no more than 6 inches high, plant some kind of plantings, keep it out of the flood zone, but just a little bit to give that extra measure of certainty to minimize.
Perfect, I have no issues.
Mr. Riley?
Yeah, on the berm, I didn't think it was really necessary. He said the water is not flowing in that direction. It wasn't flowing over toward the neighbor or down toward the cemetery. So I wouldn't think it's necessary, but I don't have a problem with including it at this point, just for future reference, if anybody out there is considering a berm or not. I say don't bother in these circumstances, but it's all right.
Good to know.
I'm good.
Jamie, good? Okay. Well, then I will entertain a motion to approve as drafted. Mike makes a motion. Looking for a second. George makes a second. All those in favor? We've got 4-0 plus 1 abstention.
Got it.
Approved. 15 Weeds. Moving on to flood damage prevention application number 449, landfilling and regrading application number 578, PL 24-148 of 18 Tokeneke Trail, LLC of 18 Tokeneke Trail. This is the proposal to construct a new driveway from an existing curb cut on Cross Road to the existing house at 18 Tokeneke Trail, and to perform related site development activities within a regulated area, including regrading of the property, installation of a new septic system, and stormwater management. The hearing was closed on November 12, 2024, and the deadline is January 16, 2025. This one was the so-called driveway portion of the redevelopment of this. I think the next item on our agenda is one of the houses that's being developed. If you recall, this was basically installing a long driveway. We heard from Ms. Zapatakis of the neighbor, there was a septic system that has to be renewed or moved and abandoned. We added on the resolution that there will be no lighting on the driveway, which was one of the requests. So I believe that is included on here, even though it's not something we typically do. But as we noted on some of the pictures, it gets to be quite a large pond there, so you wouldn't want to install a lot of lighting in that pond-like area to begin with. But anyway, we have a draft resolution in front of us. So I will go down the line. Any questions, comments, scrivener's errors, mistakes, additions, subtractions?
I was here during the presentation.
Mhm.
I was not here when the commission deliberated.
Would you like to abstain?
No, I felt confident in, or I took copious notes on
Right.
when they presented. I have in here the request for no stone walls, no Belgian block, and no lighting. And the only thing that is made it into the resolution is no lighting,
The lighting,
correct?
yeah.
Okay, I just want to verify that.
Yep.
Is that an affirmative prohibition on lighting? I'm not seeing
That's
that.
B,
Yeah.
condition B.
Condition B.
Yeah, there's no proposed lighting, but that doesn't mean that they can't come back to us with a proposal for lighting.
Right,
Is the intention to say that they are not allowed to light this ever, or is it that there is no lighting as part of this application and they're free to make another application like anyone else can?
Well, it basically says there's none proposed and none is approved herein, so
So they would have to come back.
they would have to come back
Right.
based on that
Yeah.
language.
But it's not a prohibition of lighting it, it's.
Yeah, but it's not, yeah.
I guess even if it was a prohibition, they could come back.
Right.
Right.
Nothing is forever.
Okay. But we are not prohibiting
Prohibiting.
the Belgian block.
No.
Okay, that's really all I wanted to make sure. Okay, I'm good.
I'm good.
Mr. Allen?
Recused.
Recused.
I'm good.
Good. Okay, so when I see no issues with the drafting of it, I did not detect any typos. So I will I will entertain a motion to approve as drafted. Mr. Netter makes a motion. Looking for a second. Jamie makes a second. All those in favor? 4-0 with 1 abstention.
Got it.
Okay, moving along, flood damage prevention application number 450, land filling and regrading application number 579 PL-24-149, 13 Cross Road LLC of 13 Cross Road. This is the proposal to raise the existing residence and to construct a new single-family dwelling with an attached accessory dwelling unit in generally the same location, construct a new driveway and parking courts, terrace areas, and a pool, and to perform related site development activities within regulated areas, including regrading of the property, installation of a new septic system, and stormwater management. Hearing closed on November 12th, 2024. Decision deadline on Jan 30th, 2025. This was the second portion of that application which we saw, which was to tear down the house that's sort of on the corner of Crossroad and Tokeneke Trail, cut it off from the entrance of the driveway on Cross, and build up a new house with a small ADU attached to it. We saw about the parking with the ADU. There's a parking court. You can kind of see through if you remember that rendering that they put on there. Put in a pool, generator, kind of the usual stuff we'd see for a property of this size. Otherwise, it was a pretty straightforward application. It was not nearly as contentious as the driveway portion of that initial hearing, which consumed the bulk of our time. This one was actually pretty straightforward. So I didn't notice any scrivener's errors or anything that I found to be any different. Amy, anything? She's good? Mr. Netter?
I saw a note about Joe Canis Those comments, where did I just see that? Did we need to have additional comments from him?
Letter C.
Yes.
The letter, he closed it out, but we could take his letter for the end of the week.
Okay. So are we still waiting on a letter from him?
The applicant had not responded to Mr. Canis's review comments during the public hearing. Those comments have, the applicant has, or is planning on submitting a response to those comments as part of the building permit application process. And we indicate in this approval that the application will be subject to future engineering review by Joe Canis or the town engineer relative to those outstanding comments prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Okay, perfect.
Sounds good. George?
Sure, all good.
Jamie? Good. Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to approve as drafted. Amy makes a motion. George makes a second. Get in the game here. All those in favor? 5-0. Okay. 13 cross. Done. All right. Okay, moving on to the approval of minutes. This was the November 26, 2024 meeting. I know Amy is probably going to recuse herself from it. I watched it on TV, which was thrilling.
Above and beyond.
Above and beyond. We saw 15, this was the initial and the closing of 15 weeds, which we just saw the resolution for. General meeting, we saw a proposal for the NB zone. We took a look at 12 Pratt Island. We can't change that. You guys approve that. Saw the last couple other approvals. This was for 129 Nearwater. Can't change that. 1 Rokenage Road. The renovations going down there we saw a couple months ago or weeks ago. And then I think 55 Maywood, which we approved. That was just the simple pool. And that was basically it. It was a pretty quick hearing. So does anybody see any issues, typos, anything they would like to note for the record in this? It seemed like it lined up pretty much with transcript from TV 79. So then I'll entertain a motion to approve as drafted. Jamie makes a motion.
Sure.
Mike makes a second. All those in favor? 4-0, 1 abstention.
Thank you. That's written.
Thank you. Since this is a special meeting, no other business can be considered. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Seeing none. Mike makes a motion. George makes a second. All those in favor? 5-0. Meeting is adjourned. 8:58.